Module 15. Welcome to the module on Tools and Techniques in Group Work. Introduction. The learning objectives of this module are to provide a basic understanding to the learner about the different tools and techniques in group work, to equip the learner about the use of communication, levels of communication within the group, and skills in handling communication. First, definition. The group worker engages the group with interventions aimed at facilitating movement within a group. These are called techniques. Techniques include conducting initial interviews of members for needs assessment, asking for clarifications, helping a member to practice a new behavior, requesting members to summarize what they have learned from a group session, challenging members' belief system, etc. In many groups, the most useful techniques emerge out of the work of the group members and are suited to specific evolving situations. Communication. Communication can be defined as an interpersonal process of sending and receiving symbols with messages attached to them. The following are the key elements of the communication process: sender, message, communication channel, receiver, interpreted meaning, feedback. The communication process. Communication is used for sharing information and influencing other people. Communication can occur between one or many different people. For communication to be effective, it is essential that the intended meaning of the sender is identical to the interpreted meaning of the receiver. Communication is rarely perfect and can fail for a number of reasons. There are various barriers to good communication, and awareness of these can reduce the likelihood of ineffective interpersonal communication. Barriers to communication: language, values and beliefs, sex or gender and age, economic status, educational level, physical barriers, attitudes, timing, interpretation of message. As members of a group communicate to one another, a reciprocal pattern of interaction emerges. The interaction patterns that develop can be beneficial or harmful to the group. A group worker who is knowledgeable about communication skills and interactions can intervene to help the group achieve desired goals and to ensure the socio-emotional satisfaction of members. Communication can be verbal, non-verbal, or written. Whereas members of face-to-face groups experience verbal and non-verbal communications, members of telephone groups experience only verbal communications, and members of computer groups experience only written messages. Communication can also be synchronous, that is, back and forth in real time, or asynchronous, that is, not within the same time frame. Asynchronous communications occur in computer groups, where members may respond to messages after they are posted on bulletin boards or in chat rooms. Intrapersonal communication. Communication can take place within an individual. This type of communication is called interpersonal communication or self-communication. It refers to the conversation that is continually going on in your own mind. It is conditioned by perspective, self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-assertiveness. Perspective is the way we look at things. Knowledge, understanding and values in our minds shape our perspectives or philosophies or paradigms. In this level of communication, you are both the person sending and receiving the message. It is not sufficient to be well grounded in understanding the dynamics of human behavior. The social group worker serving a growth-oriented group should understand as much as he can about the specific problems of each member in the group he is serving. This involves a study of each individual to secure as much understanding of the meaning of his manifest behavior as the combination of accessible facts of his life experience can provide. The study is continuous, but the use of principles and techniques at a given time is determined by the result of the study at that time. Knowledge and understanding of the problems of the members determine the techniques of using program content, the direction of the interacting process between members and between individual members and the worker, and the extent to which members can be helped to secure a feeling of belonging and acceptance of responsibility towards the group. The group worker needs to help the individual members work on self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-assertiveness. Self-esteem can be defined as the way in which we look at ourselves, whether we admire our capabilities or undermine ourselves, whether we look at ourselves in a positive or negative manner. Solid and good self-esteem will give us strength to shape our lives the best we can. Poor and bad self-esteem will lead to a lot of weaknesses in life. High self-confidence will help us take actions based on perspectives and values we have and give us strengths to achieve the goals we set in our life. Self-assertiveness is the capability to take a stand and take appropriate actions in defending perspectives and positive values in which you strongly believe. This requires one to understand clearly the good and bad aspects of anything, being firm and holding strictly to values, ethics, and rules that one strongly believes in. The key is in recognizing, managing, and reducing stress in self and group members. Although stress is not always bad, it can have a detrimental effect on your interpersonal communication. Learning how to recognize and manage stress in yourself and others is an important personal skill that group workers need to possess. The way we think influences our perspectives in life. Positive thoughts will produce positive life. Positive perspectives are able to produce positive actions. Positive perspectives are able to produce positive communication and interpersonal relationships. A positive attitude goes a long way in building communication bridges. It is essential to empathize with the members and understand that other people may have different points of view. Seeing things from their perspective helps in gaining the trust and respect of the group members. Interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication involves two or more people. It refers to the different types of verbal, non-verbal, and physical actions or expressions that people use when they communicate with each other. Interpersonal skills are the life skills we use every day to communicate and interact with other people, both individually and in groups. List of interpersonal skills include verbal communication, what we say and how we say it. Non-verbal communication. What we communicate without words. Body language is an example. Listening skills. How we interpret both the verbal and non-verbal messages sent by others. Negotiation. Working with others to find a mutually agreeable outcome. Problem solving. Working with others to identify, define, and solve problems. Decision making. Exploring and analyzing options to make sound decisions. Assertiveness. Communicating our values, ideas, beliefs, opinions, needs, and wants freely. Interaction patterns within a group. In addition to communication processes, we also need to look at interaction patterns that develop in a group. Patterns of group interaction. Maypole. When the leader is the central figure and communication occurs from the leader to the member and from the member to the leader. Round robin. When members take turns talking. Hot seat. When there is an extended back and forth between the leader and one member as the other members watch. Free floating. When all members take responsibility for communicating, taking into consideration their ability to contribute meaningfully to the particular topic. The first three patterns are leader-centered because the leader structures them. In leader-centered patterns, communications are directed from members to the worker or from the worker to group members, thereby reducing members' opportunities to communicate freely with each other. The fourth pattern is group-centered because it emerges from the initiatives of group members. In most situations, workers should strive to facilitate the development of group-centered rather than leader-centered interaction patterns. In group-centered patterns, members freely interact with each other. Communication channels between members of the group are open. Group-centered communication patterns tend to increase social interaction, group morale, members' commitment to group goals, and innovative decision making. However, such patterns can be less efficient than leader-centered patterns because communication may be superfluous or extraneous to group tasks. Sorting out useful communication can take a tremendous amount of group time. Therefore, in task groups that are making routine decisions, when time constraints are important and when there is little need for creative problem solving, the worker may deliberately choose to encourage leader-centered rather than group-centered interaction patterns. To establish and maintain appropriate interaction patterns, the worker should be familiar with the factors that can change communication patterns, such as cues and reinforcement that members receive for specific interactional exchanges, the emotional bonds that develop between group members, the subgroups that develop in the group, the size and physical arrangements of the group, the power and status relationships in the group. Workers can change interaction patterns to modifying these important factors. Cues and reinforcers. Cues such as words or gestures can act as signals to group members to talk more or less frequently to one another or to the worker. Workers and members can also use selective attention and other reinforcers to encourage beneficial interactions. For example, praise and other supportive comments, eye contact, and smiles tend to elicit more communication, whereas inattention tends to elicit less communication. So that all members may have a chance to participate fully in the life of a group, workers may want to reduce communication from particularly talkative members or encourage reserved members to talk more. Sometimes verbal and non-verbal cues may be needed. At other times, more active intervention is needed. For example, reserved members may benefit from group go-rounds where they are provided an opportunity to speak when it is their turn. Similarly, directing communication to others may help to reduce the amount of time dominant group members talk. Emotional bonds. Positive emotional bonds such as interpersonal liking and attraction increase interpersonal interaction, and negative emotional bonds reduce solidarity between members and result in decreased interpersonal interaction. Attraction and interpersonal liking between two members may occur because they share common interests, similar values and ideologies, complementary personality characteristics, or similar demographic characteristics. Similarly, members of a minority group might form an interest alliance based on similar concerns about the lack of community services for minority groups. Subgroups. Subgroups also affect the interaction patterns in a group. Subgroups form from the emotional bonds and interest alliances among subsets of group members. They occur naturally in all groups. They help make the group attractive to its members because individuals look forward to interacting with those to whom they are particularly close. Also, there are isolates who do not interact with the group and scapegoats who receive negative attention and criticism from the group. In some situations, the worker may actively encourage members to form subgroups, particularly in groups that are too large and cumbersome for detailed work to be accomplished. For example, subgroup formation is often useful in large task groups such as committees, delegate councils, and some teams. Members are assigned to a particular subgroup to work on a specific task or subtask. The results of the subgroup's work are then brought back to the larger group for consideration and action. Regardless of whether the worker actively encourages members to form subgroups, they occur naturally because not everyone in a group interacts with everyone else equally. The formation of intense subgroups attraction, however, can be a problem. Subgroup members may challenge the worker's authority. They may substitute their own goals and methods of attaining them for the goals of the larger group. They can disrupt the group by communicating among themselves while others are speaking. Ultimately, intense and consistent subgroup formation can negatively affect the performance of the group as a whole. When intense subgroup attraction appears to be interfering with the group as a whole, a number of steps can be taken. Strategies for addressing intense subgroup attraction. Examine whether the group as a whole is sufficiently attractive to members. Promote the development of norms that emphasize the importance of members listening to and respecting each other. Promote the development of norms restricting communication to one member at a time. Change seating arrangements. Ask for certain members to interact more frequently with other members. Use program materials and exercises that separate subgroup members. Assign tasks for members to do outside of the group in subgroups composed of different members. Skills in handling communication. Listening skills. Listening is not the same as hearing. It is essential that the group worker takes time to listen carefully to what others are saying through both their verbal and non-verbal communication. Communication process in groups can be bettered with active listening. The process of taking action to help someone say exactly what he or she really means. There are certain rules that need to be adhered to for active listening, including listening for message content, listening for and responding to feelings, noting all verbal and non-verbal cues, and paraphrasing or restating. The worker has to be aware of the words he or she is using when talking to others. It is possible that one could be misunderstood or one could confuse the issue. Hence, it becomes very important for the group worker to practice clarity and learn to seek feedback to ensure that the message communicated to the group has been understood. Techniques are chosen in light of the purpose of the group and the worker's understanding of the people and the social situation in which they are involved. They are not applied automatically in the practice of social work. The enabler knows the name of each individual in a group and addresses him according to the accepted way in his culture, not always by first name or with title, but in the way which he expects. Is able to discuss matters of interest to the members' daily life, not just the affairs of the group. Considers the schedule established by his group as important as any other obligation. Is the first one to arrive at the meeting in order to observe who comes with whom, who sits with whom, who agrees with whom, in order to identify subgroups. Uses buzz sessions to secure more participation in activity. Uses visual aids. Arranges chairs in a circle. Communication as a process. The first step in understanding and intervening in interaction patterns is for the group worker to be aware that whenever people are together in face-to-face groups, they are communicating. The non-verbal behaviors communicate intended and unintended messages. Silence, for example, can communicate sorrow, thoughtfulness, anger, or lack of interest. In addition, every group member communicates not only to transmit information, but also for many other reasons. Keisler, 1978, has suggested that people communicate with such interpersonal concerns as understanding other people, finding out where they stand in relation to other people, persuading others, gaining or maintaining power, defending themselves, provoking a reaction from others, making an impression on others, gaining or maintaining relationships, presenting a unified image to the group. a model of the process of communication. Barker and colleagues, 2000, highlight the importance of relational aspects of communication such as cooperation, connection, autonomy, similarity, flexibility, harmony, and stigmatization. Workers who are aware that group members communicate for many reasons can observe, assess, and understand communication and interaction patterns, and as patterns of communication are often consistent across different situations, group workers can use this information to work with individual members and the group as a whole. For example, it is observed that one member is consistently non-assertive in the group. The worker might help the member practice responding assertively to situations in the group. There is a likelihood that the pattern of a lack of assertiveness occurs in situations outside the group. Thus, the worker suggests that the member consider practicing the skills in situations encountered between meetings. It is to be noted that messages are often received selectively. Selective perception refers to the screening of messages so they are in line with one's belief system. Individual group members have a unique understanding of communications on the basis of their selective perception. Selected screening sometimes results in the blocking of messages so that they are not decoded and received. Napier and Gershenfeld suggest that the perception of a communication can be influenced by life positions that result from experiences in early childhood, stereotypes, the status and position of the communicator, previous experiences, assumptions and values. Thus, what might appear to a naive observer as a simple, straightforward and objective social interaction might have considerable hidden meaning for both the sender and the receiver. It is not possible or even desirable for workers to analyze each interpersonal communication that occurs in a group. However, with a little practice, workers can develop a third ear, that is, become aware of the meanings behind messages and their effect on a particular group member and on the group as a whole. Group workers are in a much better position to intervene in the group when they have a full understanding of the meanings of the messages being communicated and received by each member. It is particularly important for the worker to pay attention to the non-verbal messages that are communicated by members. Body language, gestures, and facial expressions can provide important clues about how members are reacting to verbal communications. When workers are attuned to non-verbal messages, they can verbalize the feelings conveyed in them. This in turn may encourage members to talk about issues that they were previously only able to express non-verbally. For example, without identifying particular members who may be uncomfortable being associated with a particular sentiment, the worker might say, "I noticed some tension in the group when we began to talk about. I am wondering if anyone would like to share their feelings about this." Similarly, the worker might say, "I thought I noticed a little disagreement when we began talking about." Does anybody have another suggestion? Communications can also be distorted in a transmission. Among the most common transmission problems are language barriers. Noise and other distortions inside or outside the meeting room can interfere with effective communication. Similarly, hearing or eyesight problems can create difficulties in receiving messages. Thus, when working with groups, the practitioner should be alert to physical problems that may impair communication. Physical barriers, outdated equipment used during communications, background noise, poor lighting, temperatures that are too cold or too hot. Attitudes, emotions like anger or sadness can taint objectivity. Being extremely nervous, having a personal agenda, or needing to be right no matter what can make communications less than effective. This is also known as emotional noise. Language. This can seem like an easy one, but even people speaking the same language can have difficulty understanding each other if they are from different generations or from different regions of the same country. Slang, professional jargon, and regional colloquialisms can even hurt communicators with the best intentions. Physiological barriers, ill health, poor eyesight or hearing difficulties, pain. Problems with structure design. Companies or institutions can have organization structures that are not clear, which can make communication difficult. Also to blame for faulty communications are bad information systems and lack of supervision or training of the people involved. Cultural or ethical or social barriers. Social barriers to communication include the social psychological phenomenon of conformity, a process in which the norms, values and behaviors of an individual begin to follow those of the wider group. Cultural barriers to communication, which often arise where individuals in one social group have developed different norms, values or behaviors to individuals associated with another group. Ethical barriers to communication. These occur when individuals working in an organization find it difficult to voice dissent, even though their organization is acting in ways they consider to be unethical. Lack of common experience. It's a great idea to use examples or stories to explain a point that is being discussed. However, if the speaker and the audience cannot relate to these examples because they do not have the same knowledge or have not shared the same experiences, then this tool will be ineffective. Ambiguity and overuse of abstractions. Leaving things half said, using too many generalizations, proverbs or sayings can all lead to communications that are not clear and that can lead themselves to misinterpretations. Information overload. It takes time to process a lot of information, and too many details can overwhelm and distract the audience from the important topics. Keep it simple. Assumptions and jumping to conclusions. This can make someone reach a decision about something before listening to all the facts. Overcoming barriers. Listening. Effective communication has more to do with listening than any other thing. By this we mean really listening, paying attention and caring for the other person's needs so that you make sure your message is relevant and helpful for them. Some scholars call this active listening, which entails more than just scanning what you are hearing for something that relates to a story you want to tell. Active listening shows that you genuinely care about what the other person or audience feels or thinks, and you can prove this by doing things like give reassuring sounds and phrases like I see, I understand. Ask questions to clarify the issue and show your interest, and restate the issue to make sure you understood correctly and show that this is important to you. Body language. If you are trying to come across as an assertive speaker, but your hands are shaking, your voice cracks, and your eyes are bouncing from one place to another, it affects the self-image. Also, if you are trying to make something sound really serious, but you look like you are about to burst into laughter while twirling your hair around your finger like a 7-year-old, nobody is going to take you seriously either. Make sure the rest of your body is delivering the same message that comes out of your mouth. And when you're the one listening and can see the person who is doing the talking, it is important to be attentive as the person may be sending out clues. It's important to be aware of the emotions and attitudes that one is displaying when in the presence of someone else too. Are you feeling nervous? Did you just hear something that made you angry or sad? How is that affecting the way you are delivering your message? This is not about having to have a poker face during your entire conversation. It is about being aware of your thoughts and feelings so that you are certain they do not get in the way of the message you are trying to communicate. It is okay if, say, a particular story makes you sad and a little teary-eyed, but if you are sobbing uncontrollably, others might become more concerned with making you stop than with what you have to say. Don't distract them from what you consider is the really important issue. Common language. Sometimes both people can speak the same language and still not understand each other's words. Make sure you only use slang or professional jargon if you are 100% sure that everyone who is listening can understand your words. Also, if you have a heavy accent that is unfamiliar to those around you, try to speak just a little slower. Respect. It is imperative that the group members are treated with respect and that there is no fun at the expense of any individual. This can really hamper the group process. With basic information about the nature of communication and interaction patterns in groups, workers can intervene in any group to modify or change the patterns that develop. Summary of this module. In this module, we discussed different tools and techniques in group work. We also discussed the use of communication, levels of communication within the group, and skills in handling communication. Thank you for attending this module.